Hi class, for this lesson we're talking about equivalent fractions. Our learning target is I can find equivalent fractions. Remember that equivalent is basically the same thing as saying equal to. So in this lesson we're going to talk about and we're going to learn about how to actually find equivalent fractions. If you're given a fraction like 1/2, you're going to need to be able to find another fraction that's equivalent or equal to that 1/2. So there's a few different ways we're going to do that. The first is we can use our comparing fractions, our fraction chart on page 336 in your math textbook. So if we want to find out how many fourths are equivalent to 1/2, we can look here, find 1/2, and come down to the fourth section and see how many that's the same as. Well, it's the same as 2/4. Well, I want to show you a different way because you're not always going to be able to be looking it up in your book. It's not very efficient and you're not going to be able to do it on a test. So the other way that you can do with a paper and pencil method is like this. I'm going to erase our 2 so we can figure it out this way. So we want to think about how many times this denominator can go into this denominator. So in other words, what times 2 would equal 4? Well, 2 times 2 equals 4. And then you do the exact same thing to the top. So you go 1 times 2, oh, that's 2. That's the same number we had when we did it this way. So I'm going to keep showing you the rest of these using both methods. All right, so we want to find out how many sixths are equivalent to 1/2. So if we look in our textbook, here's 1/2, come down to 6, it's 3/6 are the same as 1/2. I'm going to write it a little small so we can try it our other method, our more efficient method. So 2 times something equals 6. Oh, it's 2 times 3 equals 6. So I do the same thing to the top, and I get the number that I got from my book, which is 3. So now we want to find out about eighths. So we look in our book, find 1/2, come down to eighths. 1/2 is the same as 4/8. If we do it this way, we go 2 times what is 8? 2 times 4 is 8. Do the same thing to the top. 1 times 4 equals 4. Same thing we got. Now we're going to try it with tenths. How many tenths are the same as 1/2? And it gets a lot trickier. This is why I want you to learn this method, because it gets trickier as we go further down our fraction chart to find those equivalent fractions. So we have to kind of get close here. So 1/2 is the same as 5/10. So if we do it our paper and pencil method, 2 times what equals 10? 2 times 5 equals 10. Do the same thing to the top, and we get 1 times 5 is 5. So then if we try 2 times, we're going to do it this way first. 2 times what equals 12? 2 times 6 equals 12. So we do the same thing to the top. 1 times 6 equals 6. Let's see if we are right. Come to our book, find 1/2, come down, and it's 6/12. So when you look at this, you can kind of start to see a pattern also when we're dealing with 1/2, and you'll see this with other fractions too. But since it's 1/2, it's really easy to see. You can see that 2, the numerator, is half of 4 here. 3 is half of 6. 4 is half of 8. 5 is half of 10. And 6 is half of 12. That's the reason that they are equivalent to 1/2, why those are the same. Okay, here's another way to do this. So we're just going to try this one with our paper and pencil method and not with our book. So we know that we can multiply to find our answers here. So 4 times something equals 8. What is it? 4 times 2 equals 8. We do the same thing to the top, and now we don't have that 1 over here, so it's a little bit different, but you guys should know your math facts by now. 3 times 2 equals 6. So 3/4 is the same as 6/8. We could check and see if we're right. So if I have 3/4 here and come down to 8ths, it should line up with 6/8. Does it? It sure does. But again, this is much more efficient than looking it up in your book every single time you want to find an equivalent fractions for an assignment. All right, so it's your turn to try this. So if you have, in your practice work section of your note catcher, you need to write number 1 and then write 3/4 equals blank over 12. And then you're going to try that paper and pencil method of figuring out how many 12ths is the same as 3/4. Go ahead and try that. Now number 2 is also 3/4, but instead we have a big denominator of 40. But again, you just want to see 4 times what equals 40, and then multiply the numerator by that same number. 4 times what equals 40, then do the same on the top to get this numerator over here to see how many 40ths is the same as 3/4. Okay, there's a backwards way to do this as well. So when you have a bigger numerator on this side, you can, instead of multiplying, you can divide, and it can kind of flip-flop that way. So if we have 3/6 is the same as some halves. So the way we can do that is divide. 6 divided by what equals 2? 6 divided by 3 is 2. And that's the same as going 2 times 3 equals 6. Because we can switch multiplying and dividing. So we do the same thing to the top. 3 divided by 3 is 1. So 3/6 is equivalent to, or the same as, 1/2. All right, we have another problem over here the same kind of way. So we start with 4/8, and that's equivalent to some halves. So we're going to divide 8 by something to get 2. What would I divide 8 by to get 2? I would divide it by 4. Because 4 times 2 equals 8. Do the same thing, divide 4 by 4 up here, and we get 1. Now, if you're not comfortable with this method yet, you can always do it this way. I'm going to rewrite it the exact same way, but just kind of go backwards. So 2 times 4 equals 8, and then you're going that way. So, well, you'd have to go the other way. So it would be, let's see, you can't do it that way. Okay, so you're still going to end up with 1/2 here. But at least for the bottom number, if it helps you to think about the multiplication instead of the division, that's okay. So we have 4 more practice work. So you've already done 2. So your number 3 problem is this. 4/10 is the same as some fifths. So how many fifths is that the same as? Number 4, 8/10 is the same as blank fifths. Number 5, 10/16 is the same as blank eighths. And then number 6, 1/5 is the same as blank 20ths. Go ahead and work those problems in your practice part of your note catcher. And if you're not sure how to do it, you need to re-watch the beginning part of the video to help you. So on your note catcher, we do have one vocabulary word, equivalent fractions. I know we've talked about this one before, but I think it's really important to know what an equivalent fraction really is. So an equivalent fraction, this is your term, and here's your definition. Fractions that show the same part of a whole. So we know that 1/2 is the same as 2/4, and this is why. Because they show, this is 1/2 shaded in, this is 2/4 shaded in, they show the same part of a whole. For your summarize part of your note catcher, after you're done writing your vocabulary, here's the question I want you to answer in your summarize. How do you find an equivalent fraction? So think back to the part of the video that explained that, and you can rewatch it if you need to. You're going to write this sentence starter. You find an equivalent fraction by blank, and kind of fill in that blank with how you do that. And then I want you to show an example of equivalent fractions. So for example, 1/2 is the same as 2/4, but you need to show how you did that. So you can't use this one. If we use the one up above, you would show, sorry, the lights shut off on me here. You would show 1/2, and you would actually show the process of doing that. Okay? If you have any questions, you know you can always write those down and come to class with them tomorrow. And that's it for equivalent fractions.